Officer Rebecca Marcus thought she was just putting another defiant kid in his place. She didn't know the black teenager in the BMW was a legal prodigy holding a hidden ace. When they finally locked eyes in court, her badge wouldn't protect her from the brutal trap he'd laid. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the humid Georgia night, painting the interior of the 2021 BMW 5, series in violent, strobe-like flashes. Malik Johnson, 17 years old and 3 weeks away from a full-ride pre-law scholarship at Georgetown University, glanced at his rearview mirror. His heart did the familiar, anxious flutter that most young black men experience in this scenario, but his mind immediately shifted into a colder, highly analytical gear. He pulled over smoothly into the brightly lit parking lot of a closed gas station on Oakwood Avenue, putting the car in park. He turned off the engine, rolled down all 4 windows, turned on the interior dome light, and placed both hands flat at the top of the steering wheel. It was a routine he had practiced in his head 100 times, drilled into him by his father, a retired civil rights attorney. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. From the driver's side mirror, Malik watched Officer Rebecca Marcus approach. She was a 10-year veteran of the force, known in the precinct for her aggressive arrest numbers and her dangerously short temper. Her hand rested casually, yet deliberately, on the butt of her service weapon. Her partner, a rookie named Officer Collins, hung back near the rear bumper. "License, registration, and insurance," Officer Marcus snapped, not bothering with a greeting. She shined her heavy tactical flashlight directly into Malik's eyes, blinding him. "Good evening, officer," Malik said, his voice steady, refusing to break his calm demeanor. "My license is in my wallet in my back right pocket. The registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. How would you like me to proceed?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to composure. She was used to fear, stuttering, or anger reactions she could easily manipulate into probable cause. "Just get the documents, kid. And no sudden movements. Whose car is this? Joyriding in Daddy's vehicle?" "The vehicle is registered to my uncle, Richard Johnson. I am fully insured to drive it," Malik replied, slowly moving his right hand to his back pocket, extracting his wallet with 2 fingers, and handing over his license. He then leaned over, with telegraph slowness, to pop the glove box and retrieve the remaining paperwork. Marcus snatched the papers from his hand. She scrutinized his driver's license, looking from the plastic card to Malik's face, her expression twisting into a sneer. "Malik. Right. You know why I pulled you over, Malik?" "I don't, officer. I was maintaining exactly 35 miles per hour in a 35 zone. My taillights are functional, and I signaled my lane change back on 4th Street. "You failed to maintain your lane," Marcus lied smoothly. It was her go-to excuse. Impossible to disprove without a dash cam, and her cruiser's dash cam mysteriously malfunctioned whenever she needed it to. "You were swerving. You smell like marijuana." Malik didn't flinch. "With respect, officer, I don't drink, and I don't smoke, and I haven't swerved." "Step out of the car," Marcus commanded, her voice dropping an octave. This was the escalation phase. She was annoyed that this teenager was speaking to her like a peer. "Officer, under Pennsylvania v. Mims, I recognize your authority to order me out of the vehicle during a lawful traffic stop," Malik said, his voice ringing clearly in the quiet night. "However, I would like to state for the record that I do not consent to any searches of my person or my vehicle." Marcus froze for a fraction of a second. A teenager quoting Supreme Court case law on a Tuesday night was not on her bingo card, but her surprise quickly morphed into furious indignation. "Oh, we got a roadside lawyer here. Step out of the damn car, now." Malik unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the muggy air. He stood at his full 6'1" height, keeping his hands entirely visible. "Turn around and put your hands on the roof," Marcus barked. Stepping into his personal space, trying to intimidate him, she aggressively patted him down, her hands rough, intentionally shoving him slightly off balance against the car frame. Finding nothing but his phone and car keys, she scoffed. "Sit on the curb." While Malik sat, Marcus leaned into the open driver's side window, sweeping her flashlight over the immaculate leather interior. "I'm going to search this vehicle," she announced to her partner, who looked visibly uncomfortable. "Officer Marcus," Malik called out from the curb, his tone still perfectly modulated. "As I stated, I do not consent to a search. You have no probable cause." An unsubstantiated claim of an odor of marijuana without any physical evidence or behavioral indicators of intoxication does not bypass my Fourth Amendment rights. "Shut up!" Marcus spun around, her face flushed red. She marched over to him, looming over his seated form. "You think because you memorized a few big words, you can tell me how to do my job? I am the law out here. You're just a punk in a stolen car." "The registration proves it's not stolen," Malik replied smoothly. "I'm detaining you for obstruction of justice and resisting arrest," Marcus spat, grabbing him roughly by the shoulder and hauling him to his feet. She slammed him against the side of the BMW, pulling his arms behind his back and snapping cold steel handcuffs tightly onto his wrists. They were so tight, they immediately bit into his skin, cutting off circulation. "For the record," Malik said, his cheek pressed against the cool metal of the car door, "I am not resisting. I am complying fully. But I am noting that this is an unlawful arrest." "We'll see what the judge thinks about your little law degree, punk," Marcus sneered, shoving him toward the back of her cruiser. As she did, she didn't notice the small, sleek, aftermarket 360-degree dual-lens dashcam mounted behind the BMW's rearview mirror. It had a blinking green light. It was on, and it captured both video and crisp, high-definition audio. 6 months later, the heavy oak doors of Municipal Courtroom 302 swung shut, sealing the humid Atlanta morning outside. The air conditioning rattled loudly above, fighting a losing battle against the body heat of the packed gallery. Officer Rebecca Marcus sat at the prosecution's table beside Assistant District Attorney Thomas Wright. She looked relaxed, even bored, chewing on a piece of gum. To her, this was a Tuesday routine. A slam-dunk case against an arrogant kid who had copped an attitude. The charges were resisting arrest, obstructing a law enforcement officer, and a fabricated, reckless driving citation she tacked on for good measure. She fully expected the kid to walk in, head bowed, and take whatever plea deal Wright offered just to avoid jail time. But when the side doors opened, Marcus's chewing slowed. Malik Johnson didn't walk in wearing the standard-issue orange jumpsuit of the county jail. He wasn't wearing a wrinkled dress shirt borrowed from a relative either. Malik strode into the courtroom wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a burgundy tie. He carried a leather briefcase. Beside him walked David Sterling, one of the most ruthless and expensive defense attorneys in the state, a man whose hourly rate exceeded Marcus's weekly salary. But the real shock came when they approached the defense table. Sterling sat down in the secondary chair. Malik stood at the primary podium. Judge Arthur Davies, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for a lethal lack of patience, adjusted his glasses as he looked down at his docket. "State of Georgia versus Malik Johnson. I see here, Mr. Johnson, that you have filed a motion to proceed pro se, representing yourself, with Mr. Sterling acting merely as standby counsel. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Malik said, his voice projecting perfectly across the courtroom. "I am 18 years old now, legally an adult. I have thoroughly reviewed the rules of criminal procedure, and I am prepared to act as my own attorney today." Judge Davies raised an eyebrow, looking from Malik to the highly amused David Sterling. "It's highly irregular and usually quite foolish, son. But if Mr. Sterling is here to catch you when you fall, I will allow it. Let's proceed with the preliminary evidentiary hearing." "Is the state ready?" "Ready, Your Honor," Ada Wright said, standing up. He looked slightly annoyed by the theatricality of it all. "The state calls Officer Rebecca Marcus to the stand." Marcus strutted to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the whole truth. She settled into the wooden chair, shooting a condescending smirk at Malik. "Let the kid play lawyer," she thought. "I've eaten public defenders alive. This boy is going to cry before recess." Under Wright's direct examination, Marcus spun her web. She painted a picture of a dangerous, erratic driver. She testified under oath that Malik was swerving wildly across double yellow lines. She claimed that when she approached the vehicle, a strong, overwhelming odor of burnt marijuana emanated from the cabin. "And how did the defendant react when you asked him to step out of the vehicle, Officer Marcus?" Wright asked. "He became highly combative," Marcus lied smoothly, looking directly at the judge to feign sincerity. "He began screaming profanities. He lunged back toward the center console, which made me fear for my safety, as he could have been reaching for a weapon. I had to use physical force to remove him from the vehicle to secure the scene." "Thank you, officer. No further questions," Wright said, sitting down. Judge Davies turned his gaze to the defense table. "Mr. Johnson, do you have any questions for this witness?" Malik picked up a legal pad. He buttoned his suit jacket, stepped out from behind the defense table, and walked toward the center of the room. The entire gallery held its breath. The image of the young, poised black man squaring off against the veteran officer who had assaulted him was striking. "I do, Your Honor," Malik said. He turned his eyes on Marcus. They were cold, analytical, and entirely devoid of fear. "Officer Marcus, you testified that I was swerving across the double yellow lines on Oakwood Avenue, correct?" "That is correct," Marcus said, lifting her chin. "Are you aware, officer, that the stretch of Oakwood Avenue where you initiated the traffic stop between 4th Street and the abandoned Sunoco station was completely repaved the week prior to this incident?" Marcus frowned. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's relevant, Officer Marcus, because the city had not yet painted the lines back on the road," Malik said smoothly, stepping closer to the jury box. "There were no double yellow lines for me to swerve across. Does the state disagree with municipal paving records?" Ada Wright shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus swallowed hard. I meant you were swerving into the oncoming traffic lane." "I see," Malik said, jotting a check mark on his pad. "Now, you also testified under oath just 3 minutes ago that I lunged toward the center console, making you fear for your life. Is that your sworn testimony?" "Yes. You made a sudden, aggressive movement." Malik turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, the defense would like to enter Exhibit A into evidence, a certified diagnostic log from the onboard computer of my 2021 BMW. "Objection." Wright stood up. "Relevance?" "The relevance, Your Honor," Malik explained, "is that modern luxury vehicles log the exact timestamps of when interior compartments are opened. The log will show the glove box was opened at 11:42 p.m., precisely when I was retrieving my registration. The center console was never opened that entire evening. Furthermore, my vehicle is equipped with driver-side weight sensors. If I had lunged or thrown my body weight to the right, the sensor log would register the shift. It shows I remained perfectly centered in the seat until the door opened." Judge Davies looked intrigued. "Overruled. The exhibit is admitted." Marcus's face was beginning to lose its smug color. She gripped the edges of the witness stand. "Technology glitches all the time," she scoffed defensively. "Does it?" Malik asked, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. "Let's talk about technology, Officer Marcus. You claim I was screaming profanities at you. You claim I resisted arrest." "You did," she insisted, her voice rising. "You were completely out of control." Malik turned his back to her and looked at David Sterling. Sterling smiled faintly and handed Malik a small black USB drive. "Officer Marcus, did your police cruiser have a functional dash cam that night?" Malik asked. It malfunctioned. "The footage was corrupted," Marcus said, repeating the excuse she had put in her official report. "How convenient," Malik mused, pacing slowly in front of her. "Fortunately, my vehicle did not suffer from such a mysterious technological failure. Your Honor, I would like to introduce Defense Exhibit B into evidence. The high-definition audio and 360-degree video footage from my vehicle's aftermarket security camera, capturing the entire interaction from the moment the flashing lights appeared to the moment Officer Marcus falsely arrested me." The color completely drained from Rebecca Marcus's face. The courtroom erupted in a flurry of whispers. Ada Wright dropped his pen, staring in horror at the flash drive in the teenager's hand. Malik looked up at the judge, then back to the terrified officer. "Shall we play the tape, Officer Marcus? Or would you like to revise your testimony before we add aggravated perjury to your growing list of legal liabilities?" The silence in courtroom 302 was absolute, thick enough to suffocate. Ada Thomas Wright slowly lowered himself into his chair, his eyes fixed on the black USB drive in Malik's hand, as if it were a live grenade. On the witness stand, Officer Rebecca Marcus's knuckles turned bone white as she gripped the wooden railing. The condescending sneer had vanished, replaced by the wide-eyed primal panic of a predator suddenly realizing it had stepped into a steel trap. "Your Honor," Wright stammered, scrambling to his feet. "The state has not been provided with this evidence during discovery. This is a clear violation of procedure. An ambush." "Mr. Wright," Judge Arthur Davies interrupted, his voice dropping into a perilous, gravelly register. "Are you objecting to the introduction of exculpatory evidence that your own office failed to uncover because your primary witness claimed her equipment miraculously failed?" "No, Your Honor. But the chain of custody. I have the sworn affidavit of Dr. Gregory Lynn from Blackhawk Digital Forensics, a highly reputable firm routinely utilized by the Department of Justice," Malik interjected smoothly, handing a thick stack of stapled papers to the bailiff to pass to the judge and the prosecutor. "Doctor, Lynn personally extracted the data from the vehicle's encrypted drive. The hash values match perfectly. There has been zero alteration, editing, or tampering. It is pristine, untouched reality." Judge Davies scanned the affidavit, his jaw setting into a hard line. He looked up at Malik. "Proceed, Mr. Johnson." Bailiff set up the monitor. A heavy, rolling flat-screen television was wheeled to the center of the courtroom, angled so the judge, the witness, and the gallery could all see it clearly. The bailiff inserted the drive. "Play file labeled Stop, Oakwood, 2344, Malik instructed. The screen flickered, and suddenly, the courtroom was transported to the humid Georgia night 6 months prior. The video was stunningly clear, captured in crisp 4K resolution by the hidden dual-lens system. One half of the screen showed the view out the windshield. The other half showed the illuminated interior of the BMW, capturing Malik's calm profile and the driver's side window. The audio hissed to life, capturing the deep, thrumming bass of a passing truck before settling into the quiet hum of the BMW's engine. "License, registration, and insurance," Marcus's voice barked through the courtroom speakers, harsh and instantly aggressive. The flashlight beam blinded the interior lens for a fraction of a second before the camera's auto exposure compensated, clearly revealing Marcus's hand resting menacingly on her holster. The gallery watched as Malik, perfectly polite, perfectly calm, explained exactly where his documents were and asked for permission to move. They watched the slow, deliberate movement of his hands. There was no lunging. There was no sudden reach for the center console. There was only textbook compliance. "You failed to maintain your lane," the recorded Marcus lied. "You were swerving. You smell like marijuana." Then came Malik's recorded rebuttal, polite but firm, denying the allegations. The video clearly showed Malik stepping out of the vehicle. It showed Marcus grabbing him, shoving him violently against the doorframe without provocation. "I am detaining you for obstruction of justice and resisting arrest," the recorded Marcus spat, yanking his arms backward with unnecessary force. The video played Malik's final calm assertion. "For the record, I am not resisting. I am complying fully. But I am noting that this is an unlawful arrest." Malik paused the video right on Marcus's sneering face as she slammed him against the car. The image burned on the screen. Malik turned from the monitor and walked slowly back to the podium. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. His face remained a mask of sheer, terrifying competence. "Officer Marcus," Malik said, the silence in the room amplifying his words. "Would you like me to replay the section where I lunged for the center console? Or perhaps the section where I screamed profanities at you? Because I seem to have missed them. Marcus opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Ada Wright, silently pleading for an objection, an intervention, anything. Wright was staring at his legal pad, his face buried in his hands. He was abandoning ship. The camera angle is restrictive, Marcus finally stammered, her voice trembling. It doesn't capture the whole scene. It doesn't capture the smell of the narcotics. Ah, the phantom narcotics, Malik replied. Your Honor, I direct your attention to the secondary arrest report filed by Officer Marcus's partner, Officer Collins. Following my unlawful arrest, my vehicle was impounded and subjected to a full invasive K-9 search. No narcotics were found. No paraphernalia was found. Not a single trace of marijuana was detected in that vehicle. Judge Davies removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. When he looked back up at Marcus, the contempt in his eyes was palpable. Officer Marcus, you are under oath. Do you wish to revise your previous testimony regarding the events of that evening? Your Honor, I. Marcus stammered, tears of sheer panic finally welling in her eyes. In the heat of the moment, perceptions can be distorted. I believed my life was in danger. I acted on my training. Your training? Malik's voice cracked like a whip, shedding its polite veneer for the first time. Your training dictates that you fabricate a traffic violation, invent the presence of narcotics to manufacture probable cause, physically assault a compliant citizen, and then commit aggravated perjury in a court of law to cover your tracks? Objection! Badgering the witness, Wright cried out weakly, mostly out of a professional obligation to say something. Overruled, Judge Davies snapped immediately. The witness will answer the question. Though, Officer Marcus, I must advise you of your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, because right now you are confessing to multiple felonies on my witness stand. Marcus clamped her mouth shut, her chest heaving. She invoked her Fifth Amendment right with a slight, trembling nod. The immediate case against Malik was effectively dead. He had proven his innocence beyond a shadow of a doubt and exposed the arresting officer as a liar. Most defense attorneys would have stopped there, filed a motion to dismiss, and walked out of the courtroom victorious. But Malik Johnson wasn't just a defendant. He was the son of Richard Johnson. And he wasn't done, Your Honor, Malik said, his tone shifting back to icy professionalism. Given that the state's sole witness has just invoked her Fifth Amendment rights after being caught in blatant perjury, I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges with prejudice. ADA Wright stood up slowly. The state withdraws all charges against Mr. Johnson. Your Honor, we will be launching an immediate internal review of this case. The charges are dismissed with prejudice. Judge Davies struck his gavel. Mr. Johnson, you are free to go. Officer Marcus, you will remain seated. I am holding you in contempt of court, and I am issuing a bench warrant for your arrest on charges of aggravated perjury. Bailiff, take her badge and her weapon. A gasp rippled through the gallery. The bailiff approached the witness stand. Marcus, weeping openly now, unclipped her duty belt and handed it over, her hands shaking violently. Thank you, Your Honor, Malik said. However, before the court adjourns, I have one final motion. Judge Davies narrowed his eyes. Mr. Johnson, you've already won. The charges are dismissed. What more could you possibly have? Malik reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound dossier. He handed it to his standby counsel, David Sterling, who smiled like a shark smelling blood in the water. Sterling walked forward and handed the dossier to the judge, and a copy to the pale ADA Wright. Your Honor, what happened to me was not an isolated incident, Malik explained, his voice echoing with authority. It was not a mistake or a distorted perception. It is a documented, systemic pattern of racial profiling, civil rights violations, and perjury. Wright flipped open the dossier, his eyes widening in horror. Over the past 6 months, my standby counsel and I have conducted a deep forensic analysis of Officer Rebecca Marcus's arrest records over the last 5 years, Malik continued. We utilized the Freedom of Information Act to subpoena the dashcam maintenance logs for the 14th Precinct. We cross-referenced those logs with Officer Marcus's arrest reports. Malik turned to address the gallery, then brought his piercing gaze back to the judge. We discovered a statistical anomaly, Your Honor. Over the last 5 years, Officer Marcus has reported her cruiser's dashcam as malfunctioning or corrupted a staggering 73 times. In 68 of those instances, 93% of the time, the suspect arrested was an African-American male under the age of 30. In every single one of those cases, the charges were identical to mine: resisting arrest, obstruction, and a fabricated traffic violation. The courtroom was dead silent. The magnitude of what the teenager was revealing was earth-shattering. This wasn't just a defense tactic anymore. This was the systematic dismantling of a corrupt police career. Furthermore, Malik said, pointing to a specific page in the dossier, we hired independent auditors from the firm of Harrison and Caldwell to review the corrupted SD cards from her cruiser, which we obtained through a civil preservation order. They discovered that the data wasn't corrupted by a system error. The drives had been intentionally formatted, manually wiped. Officer Marcus has been routinely destroying evidence that contradicts her false reports. Judge Davies flipped through the pages, his face darkening with absolute fury. He looked at Ada Wright. Mr. Wright, were you aware of this Giglio material? Because if the district attorney's office knew about this pattern of behavior and continued to put this officer on the stand, I will hold your entire department in contempt. No, Your Honor, absolutely not. Wright practically shouted, desperately trying to distance himself from the radioactive officer sitting in the witness box. We rely on the precinct's Internal Affairs Division for disciplinary disclosures. We had no idea. Ignorance is a poor shield, Mr. Wright, Malik said smoothly. By failing to disclose this officer's history of perjury and evidence tampering to past defendants, the state has committed dozens of Brady violations. Therefore, Your Honor, the defense is submitting this dossier into the public record. We are formally requesting that the district attorney's office review every single conviction that relied on Officer Marcus's testimony for immediate exoneration. Judge Davies let out a long, heavy breath. He looked at Malik Johnson, seeing not an 18-year-old kid, but a legal juggernaut who had just single-handedly ignited a federal investigation. The court accepts the dossier into the public record, Judge Davies said solemnly, and Mr. Wright, you will inform the district attorney that I expect a full, comprehensive review of Officer Marcus's arrest history on my desk by the end of the month. If I find that your office swept this under the rug, there will be hell to pay. The judge then turned his terrifying gaze back to Rebecca Marcus, who was now sobbing into her hands, stripped of her belt, her authority, and her freedom. Officer Marcus, Judge Davies said, his voice dripping with disgust. You took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon to terrorize citizens based on the color of their skin. Believing your authority made you untouchable. You thought you could target a young man because you assumed he was powerless. You assumed wrong. The judge pointed his gavel at her. You are remanded to the custody of the county sheriff without bail, pending your arraignment for perjury, evidence tampering, and filing false police reports. And, based on what Mr. Johnson has just submitted to this court, I suspect the Department of Justice will be contacting you very soon regarding federal civil rights violations. Take her away, the judge ordered. 2 bailiffs stepped forward, pulling the weeping former officer to her feet. They pulled her hands behind her back. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs, echoing in the silent courtroom, was a sound of pure, unadulterated karma. As they led her past the defense table, she looked up, her tear-streaked face meeting Malik's calm, unwavering gaze. She had tried to destroy his future, entirely unaware that he had just dismantled her entire life. Court is adjourned, Judge Davies announced, striking the gavel with a finality that cracked like thunder. The heavy oak doors of Municipal Courtroom 302 swung open, and the humid Atlanta air hit Malik Johnson like a physical wave. But this time, he wasn't stepping out into the oppressive atmosphere of fear. he was stepping into a flashbulb storm. Standby counsel David Sterling had known exactly what was going to happen in that courtroom. While Malik was methodically dismantling Officer Rebecca Marcus on the stand, Sterling's paralegal had quietly forwarded the digital dossier and the dashboard camera footage to every major news outlet in the state, along with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. The press was waiting. Microphones were thrust into Malik's face as reporters shouted over one another. "Malik! How does it feel to take down a veteran officer?" "Mr. Johnson, are you planning a civil suit?" Malik stood perfectly still, adjusting his burgundy tie. He didn't smile for the cameras. He looked directly into the primary broadcast lens of the local news affiliate. "Today wasn't about taking down an officer," Malik said, his voice cutting through the noise with practiced, resonant clarity. "It was about exposing a predator who used a taxpayer-funded badge to hunt the vulnerable. There are 68 young men currently sitting in jail cells or carrying felony records because of Rebecca Marcus's perjury. My fight isn't over until every single one of them is exonerated, and the system that allowed her to operate in the dark is dragged out into the light." By 6:00 p.m. that evening, the video file, "Stop, Oakwood, 2344, was the #1 trending topic worldwide. By the following morning, it had caught the attention of prominent national civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who publicly lauded Malik's brilliance on national television, calling it a watershed moment for police accountability. But the real twist, the true crushing weight of karma, was just beginning to unfold behind the scenes. The viral outrage forced the hand of the district attorney's office, but the federal government didn't wait for local politics to play out. Acting on the dossier Malik had entered into the public record, the FBI raided the 14th precinct. Agents in windbreakers marched out carrying boxes of hard drives, internal affairs complaints, and printed emails. The pressure immediately fell on Officer Thomas Collins, Marcus's rookie partner who had stood by silently during the unlawful arrest. Facing federal obstruction charges and potential prison time himself, Collins cracked. Within 48 hours of the courtroom humiliation, Collins sat in an FBI interrogation room, signed a proffer agreement, and began to sing. He revealed a secret that blew the scandal wide open. It wasn't just Marcus. Collins confessed that Captain Richard Hayes, the precinct commander, had instituted a shadow quota system. Officers were promised premium overtime shifts, favorable evaluations, and protection from internal affairs if they maintained high arrest numbers in predominantly minority neighborhoods to justify securing federal anti-gang grant money. Marcus wasn't a rogue agent. She was the captain's star earner. She had been actively protected by the chain of command, encouraged to fabricate probable cause to keep the statistics climbing. The resulting legal earthquake shattered the Atlanta Police Department. 3 weeks later, federal prosecutors unsealed a sweeping 50-count indictment against Rebecca Marcus, Captain Hayes, and 4 other officers in the 14th precinct. Marcus, who had hoped to quietly resign and secure a plea deal for local perjury, suddenly found herself staring down the barrel of the Department of Justice. She was charged under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law, along with federal conspiracy, wire fraud, and mass evidence tampering. The trial was a bloodbath. Marcus's previous arrogance evaporated under the harsh fluorescent lights of the federal courthouse. Without her uniform, sitting at the defense table in a drab gray suit, she looked small, terrified, and entirely ordinary. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she was a product of a toxic culture, a pawn in Captain Hayes' game. But the jury had watched Malik's dashcam video. They had seen the sheer, malicious joy in her eyes as she slammed a compliant teenager against a car. It took the federal jury less than 4 hours to return a guilty verdict on all counts. When the federal judge handed down her sentence, he did not mince words. "Rebecca Marcus, you are a disgrace to the uniform you wore. You weaponized the law to destroy the lives of innocent citizens, stealing their time, their finances, and their dignity. You will now forfeit your own." She was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. She was stripped of her police pension. In the resulting civil lawsuits, the city liquidated her assets to help cover the damages. She left the courtroom in shackles, her career obliterated, her freedom gone, heading to a high-security facility where former law enforcement officers were kept in permanent protective isolation. But the truest victory belonged to the victims. Using the evidence Malik had meticulously gathered, the district attorney's office was forced to undergo a mass exoneration process. 68 convictions were overturned. Young men who had lost their jobs, their scholarships, and years of their lives were released from state penitentiaries. Malik Johnson, alongside his father Richard Johnson and David Sterling, spearheaded a massive class-action federal civil rights lawsuit against the city on behalf of the 68 victims. The city, desperate to avoid a catastrophic trial that would bankrupt the municipality, settled out of court for a staggering $45 million. Malik refused to take a single dime of his personal settlement portion. Instead, he used his share to establish the Oakwood Foundation, a legal defense fund dedicated to providing elite pro bono defense attorneys to low-income minorities facing fraudulent police charges. He ensured that no teenager in his city would ever have to face a corrupt officer alone again. 4 years later, the heavy oak doors of an ivy-covered building in Washington, D.C. swung open. Malik Johnson, now 22 years old, walked out holding his Juris Doctor degree from Georgetown University Law Center. He had graduated at the absolute top of his class, completing the program a full year early. He already had a dozen offers from the most prestigious corporate law firms in the country, waiving starting salaries in the high six figures. But Malik didn't look at them. He slipped his phone from his pocket and looked at a text message from the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. They were offering him a position as a lead federal prosecutor. He smiled. Officer Rebecca Marcus had tried to ruin his life on a humid Tuesday night, assuming he was just another statistic. Instead, she had forged the very weapon that was going to tear down corrupt cops across the entire country for the next 40 years. The system had tried to break him. Now Malik Johnson was going to run the system. If this story of ultimate courtroom karma and a brilliant young legal mind fighting back against a corrupt system gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video to spread the word that justice can still be won. And subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories of revenge, legal battles, and triumphant victories. Ring the bell so you never miss an upload.